We're in a critical situation here, and we're almost out of fuel. On September 11, 2018, Air India 101 finds itself high in the skies, making its second attempt to land at John F. Kennedy International Airport. The aircraft has encountered multiple significant instrument failures during its 14-hour flight, leaving the pilots with dwindling fuel reserves. Compounding the issue, the Instrument Landing System, ILS, crucial for guiding the aircraft during poor weather conditions, is also offline. As heavy rain envelopes the aircraft amidst thick clouds, the pilots struggle to locate the runway, exacerbating the urgency to land. With each passing moment, the fuel supply diminishes, intensifying the pressure on the pilots to act swiftly. The safety of the 357 passengers on board hinges on the decisions made in the critical minutes ahead. Can they avert another tragedy on this fateful date in New York? Let's delve into the tale of Air India Flight 101.
Story of heroism on 9/11. 4 Air India pilots on board a flagship flight from Delhi to New York faced one of the most dangerous situations imaginable. They were low on fuel with multiple systems failing in their Boeing 777 aircraft, yet they managed to land safely with 370 passengers on board.
Set against the backdrop of a balmy autumn night at New Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport, 342 passengers and 15 crew members prepare for their lengthy journey to New York. With Indian students and tourists flocking to the United States, the flight operates at full capacity. This flagship route of Air India traverses the polar route, navigating the rugged landscapes of Pakistan, Russia, Finland, Greenland, and Canada before reaching the USA. The aircraft designated for today's flight is a Boeing 777-300ER, equipped with two GE90-115B engines. Having served Air India since 2009, this aircraft boasts over 9 years of operational history. Despite being capable of two-pilot operation, the extended duration of this 15-hour flight necessitates a crew of 4, with 2 pilots acting as the primary crew and 2 as relief. Captain Rustam Palia, aged 49, commanded the flight with 3,500 hours of experience on this aircraft type. Joining him in the cockpit were Captain Vikas, Captain Shirshan Singh, and Captain D.S. Buddy, marking the first time this quartet flew together. During the pre-flight briefing, the engineering team notified them of the non-functioning auxiliary power unit, APU, which, although not critical for safe operations, provides backup power for various systems when the main engines are offline. Assessing this issue as non-critical, the pilots decided to proceed with the flight to New York, considering the possibility of adverse weather conditions. As a precaution, they unloaded an additional 800 kilograms of fuel to allow for diversion to an alternate airport if necessary. This decision proved pivotal later on. After requesting pushback and taxi clearance, the aircraft departed from Delhi, delayed by approximately 1 hour. The departure itself was uneventful. 40 minutes into the flight, while over Pakistani airspace and shortly after reaching 30,000 feet, a warning message appeared on the pilot's screen indicating a single-source radio altimeter issue. Radio altimeters are crucial instruments that gauge an aircraft's height above the ground by sending and receiving signals. Typically, modern commercial aircraft like the Boeing 777 feature 3 radio altimeters for redundancy. However, in this instance, the aircraft signaled that 2 altimeters had failed, leaving only 1 operational. This raised concerns about the accuracy of the remaining altimeter's readings. While not problematic during cruise flight, where a barometric altimeter utilizing air pressure determines altitude above sea level, accurate altitude information is crucial during takeoff and landing. The barometric altimeter relies on atmospheric pressure to ascertain the aircraft's altitude above sea level, operating on the principle that atmospheric pressure decreases as altitude increases. However, it is considered less precise than the radio altimeter, especially when precise altitude information is crucial, such as during departure and, more significantly, during landing. Keep this distinction in mind for now. We will revisit it shortly. Fast forward 10 hours, and the flight finds itself traversing the Atlantic Ocean, with approximately 3 hours remaining before the scheduled landing time. In New York, the pilots received a warning indicating that their traffic collision avoidance system, TCAS, was malfunctioning. TCAS functions akin to a savvy traffic controller for aircraft, utilizing radar to detect other planes in the airspace. In the event of potential collisions, TCAS instructs pilots to ascend or descend to avoid conflict, thereby enhancing airspace safety and preventing mid-air collisions. While the loss of TCAS during cruise flight was not a significant concern since it serves as a backup system to prevent collisions, it plays a crucial role as a safety aid during takeoff and landing, particularly in busy airspace where the workload is high. The crew became increasingly concerned as it was unusual for unrelated instruments to fail simultaneously. Prior to takeoff, the auxiliary power unit, APU, was non-functional, followed by the failure of the radio altimeters shortly after takeoff. Now, with the TCAS malfunctioning, the pilots faced a series of instrument failures, raising apprehensions about the aircraft's overall condition. Their primary concern was whether there might be an undisclosed issue with the aircraft responsible for these successive failures. However, given the circumstances, there was little they could do but continue onward to New York. By this time, it was roughly 10 minutes past 6 in the morning in New York, where the weather conditions were characterized by overcast skies, rain, and clouds. The Meta reported a visibility of a quarter statute mile for runway 04 right, with a vertical visibility of 200 feet. As Air India 101 entered New York airspace, the crew established communication with the approach controller, who provided clearance for runway 04 right at JFK Airport. Despite obtaining their approach clearance, the pilots encountered difficulties using their instrument landing system, ILS, to capture the localizer and glide slope, essential for guiding the aircraft to the runway. Despite their efforts, the ILS failed to capture the localizer's signals, rendering their instrument landing system inoperative. The ILS plays a critical role in assisting aircraft during landings by utilizing specialized radio signals and antennas on the runway to guide the aircraft safely, providing pilots with directional and altitude guidance, especially in adverse weather conditions. Additionally, it facilitates auto-landing capabilities. Unfortunately, in this instance, the ILS was unable to lock onto the signals from the runway. Consequently, the crew resorted to manually aligning the aircraft with the correct heading and opted for what is known as the NAV-VNAV approach. This approach relies on GPS technology, similar to that found in automotive navigation systems, to guide the aircraft close to the runway. However, unlike the ILS, the NAV-VNAV approach isn't as precise, with a lateral precision of 0.3 nautical miles. Consequently, the pilots must have visual contact with the runway at their decision altitude before attempting to land. Failure to establish visual contact means they must abort the landing and try again. As they approached the runway, the pilots deployed the landing gear, triggering another warning in the cockpit. This warning indicated that the landing gear might not be fully deployed, requiring immediate attention. Responding to the alert, the pilots instinctively checked the gear, only to find it was down and that the warning was a false alarm. However, this unexpected distraction added to their already heavy workload. At this juncture, the aircraft was covering a significant distance, approximately 3 to 4 miles per minute. Despite the ongoing instrument failures and false gear warnings, the pilots struggled to stabilize the aircraft for landing, prompting them to execute a go-around and attempt another landing. Acknowledging the instructions from Air Traffic Control, ATC, the aircraft climbed back to 2,000 feet, and the pilots communicated with the New York departure controller to inform them of their situation and request additional holding vectors to address their issues before attempting another landing. The crew explained to ATC that they needed more time to resolve the instrument problems and weren't prepared for a second landing attempt yet. They detailed the challenges they faced, including the loss of the localizer and changes in their minimums, necessitating a reevaluation of their approach strategy. To comprehend the subsequent events, it's essential to grasp the concept of a cloud ceiling, which denotes the height at which the lowest part of the clouds is above the ground. This ceiling determines the altitude at which pilots can begin to see the ground. While an aircraft equipped with a functional ILS and auto-land capability could land with a cloud ceiling of 0 feet, the pilots, operating under non-precision approach conditions, needed a minimum ceiling of 600 feet to ensure a safe landing. However, JFK Airport's ceiling was only 200 feet, presenting a challenge. The visibility is acceptable, but our primary concern lies with the ceiling. We cannot proceed with the Instrument Landing System, ILS, due to the 200-foot ceiling. Whenever we attempt to lock onto the localizer, the instrumentation fails to cooperate. Understood. So, autopilot landing isn't an option either? No, unfortunately. Autoland isn't feasible due to the failure of both radio altimeters. With one altimeter working and multiple other instrument failures, including the Traffic Collision Avoidance System, TCAS, autoland is not viable. We require a ceiling of at least 600 feet to safely proceed. Got it. I understand. Now, maintain a heading of 220 degrees. Let me check the weather and find a suitable solution. Another concern the pilots faced was preserving fuel to accommodate multiple go-arounds if necessary. This necessitated landing at a nearby airport rather than diverting to Boston or Washington. Before I proceed, what's your alternate option? Our primary alternate is Newark, and Stewart serves as the secondary. However, both airports seem to be experiencing similar conditions. As fuel reserves diminished, the additional 800 kilos loaded in Delhi proved to be beneficial. Do you have any preferences? We're running low on fuel, so we need to decide quickly. Albany is reporting a 600-foot overcast, while Boston Logan is at 500. I'm also checking on Washington, Dulles, which is at 200 feet. We'll need to assess Pittsburgh's fuel availability as well. Understood. Maintain 6,000 feet. Based on current weather and forecasts, Bradley International Airport appears to be the best option, with a ceiling of 500 feet overcast. I'm considering a VNAV approach due to our fuel constraints. Okay. Is Newark improving? Yes, sir. Newark's weather just improved to a 400-foot overcast. A recent meter confirms the change. With Newark's ceiling now at 400 feet, albeit still below our desired 600 feet, the pilots opted to attempt a landing there. Confirming that you're opting for a VNAV approach into Newark? That's correct. It's our only viable option given the unpredictable nature of the ILS, which fails to lock onto the localizer consistently. Got it. Both sides of the aircraft's ILS are out of service, correct? Yes, sir. And you mentioned that both radar altimeters are out of service on the aircraft? That's correct. We're relying on a single radio altimeter now. At this juncture, the plane had approximately 7,200 kilograms of fuel remaining, just sufficient to complete the journey. Aaron, aside from both ILS systems and both radar altimeters, what other malfunctions have occurred on the aircraft? We have a failure in the single-source radio altimeter, TCAS failure, disabled autoland, windshield system malfunction, auto-speed brakes malfunction, and an unserviceable APU. In a sobering reminder of their precarious situation, the controller requested information on the number of passengers and remaining fuel on board. We have a total of 370 passengers and 7,200 kilograms of fuel. Subsequently, the pilots were handed over to the Newark approach controller, who cleared them for the ILS approach to runway 4 right. The controller mobilized emergency vehicles as a precautionary measure. At this juncture, the crew had been operating for over 14 hours in a highly stressful environment, attempting to land a fully loaded aircraft in one of the world's busiest airspaces, with several instruments malfunctioning. Despite the challenging conditions and limited visibility outside the cockpit, the pilots continued their descent, hoping for improved visibility. As the aircraft descended past 1,000 feet, it deviated from the ideal descent path, necessitating corrective action from Captain Palia, who adjusted the aircraft's pitch to realign with the correct path. However, this led to an increase in speed, prompting a warning from the controller regarding the aircraft's proximity to the ground. Upon breaking through the clouds at 400 feet, the pilots realized they were too high and off-center. Captain Palia corrected the flight path by adjusting the aircraft's pitch and direction to align with the runway centerline. After 15 hours of flight, the aircraft safely landed on runway 4 right at Newark. Emergency services offered assistance, but the pilots declined. 10 minutes later, as they taxied to the gate, a thunderstorm engulfed the airport. Had the crew delayed their approach by just 5 minutes or needed to perform a second go-around, landing would have been impossible. The root cause of the instrument failures remains unknown, with speculation suggesting a malfunction in the aircraft's main computer system. Despite being a crew of 4 individuals who had not previously worked together, the pilots demonstrated exceptional crew resource management, effectively coordinating with each other and air traffic control to ensure a safe landing. The plane was flown back to India the